Well, hello everyone. Clint Richardson and I are back. Clint hit me up recently. He said he had something shocking to unveil for all of us. So, Clint, what was this you wanted to talk about today?
Well, you have to forgive me because this is going to be kind of a lecture. You're welcome to chime in anytime you want, and I'm hoping you will if you have questions or something's not clear. But I've done a lot of research and documentaries and stuff on vaccines and COVID and all that stuff. So I consider myself somewhat of an expert on the subject after over a decade of messing with this stuff. And I've always known about what I'm about to show you, and I've always warned people of this, but now I can actually now things are becoming, how do you say it? We've lived in sort of an illusionary place where things aren't openly admitted, but now things are starting to come out because we're transferring, I think, from basically the analog to the digital in every respect, right? For instance, I'm sort of an in between. I grew up, with an antenna on the roof that I had to turn with a thing, and it would turn the antenna to get a signal on my 13 frickin' channels. Whereas you grew up with what? I mean, cable and satellite and YouTube and all this shit, right?
Right.
So, so I'm sort of my generation is sort of the transfer, the ones that still don't really aren't really able to accept a lot of the new stuff. Whereas if you're growing up in it or you're born into it, you're not even going to know what analog is. When I went to sound engineering school, for instance, they taught us on old magnetic tape reel-to-reel machines that are huge. They look like giant copiers, so that they could instill in us that the digital is just a copy of the analog without all the, stuff. It's all code, right? So now we use Pro Tools or we use these digital programs. Now AI is making music, and that's somehow okay with people, and it's not. It's really not okay. AI is telling stories. AI is, talking about the end of the world, and it's just, it's a joke, but it's really not a joke. And so what's happening is all of the analog, in other words, all of the research that they never would reveal before is now starting to come out in some of these reports and stuff, specifically in this case about medicines, vaccines, the fact that, you know, I got to caveat this by saying in this documentary I'm working on, a part two of the COVID documentary, they explicitly tell you openly that there has never been a pandemic or plague or whatever that wasn't man made. They know this, right?
Right.
Even back to the 1918 Spanish flu, etc., they know that was a vaccine induced uh, uh, typhoid fever, right? Spanish flu was a misnomer. It's almost like saying cannabis is marijuana, which is a Mexican term, right? It's a complete misnomer. So what I'm about to show you is what I've been trying to tell people for a long time, and now I can actually show you. Basically, that vaccines are what causes disease, either directly or indirectly, meaning I get a vaccine, I'm getting the disease in an attenuated or altered state. A patented one means it's not natural, right? So whatever they're delivering to us in these vaccines is their own invention because they cannot put natural virus, you can't patent that, right? So everything they do has to be a resequencing, a reimagination of nature because you cannot control or patent nature. And that's the point that needs to be driven home with COVID, with polio, with all of these things. So, what I'm about to show you is factual reporting from the NIH and all these things that show that where these diseases are coming from, that the vaccine is actually causing directly and indirectly. In other words, spreading, people are spreading the disease in a way that, and I'm going to give you an example before I start. Back when we were talking, I was talking to Patrick Jordan on the radio. Uh, he had a friend had contacted him and said, "Look, I work in somewhere in New York, I believe, in rabies, right? I'm the one that test samples are sent from deer and other animals that get rabies, dogs, etc. And I'm here to tell you, I have not seen a what's called a wild type rabies virus in over a decade. There are no cases reported ever of actual rabies. It's all the vaccine strain, which is a modified strain done in a lab in order to be patented and therefore profitable for these companies. So, what I'm telling you, and what people don't want to believe, unfortunately, is that all these diseases, all these outbreaks, and other things too. For instance, food recalls. I have a report that shows that government's responsible for all these food recalls because they use what's called MAP, which is a substance you put on lettuce and spinach and all these things that have been recalled to apples, right? You think it's wax, but it's actually a substance that allows the apple to have a longer shelf life. Well, that also allows bugs to inhabit the mapped MAP is it stands for something vegetables or fruit, and so you get all these outbreaks. Well, and they go and they destroy the crops, and then they recall all of it. It's billions of dollars in hospital bills, and it turns out it's not the crop, it's the map, it's the uh, coating they're putting on. They're dipping spinach and stuff in this horrible, horrible like plastic type of coating so that it doesn't wilt. So they admit, if you can find the reports, they admit that they're responsible in government, these agencies that are just absolutely amoral and completely corrupt. They admit that they do everything, and they have to admit it because if they don't have it admitted somewhere, they can't do anything about it. They can't work with it. They can't use it in their risk to benefit analysis kind of things, right? So they have to talk about these things, which is why we know so much about, or I know so much about COVID, is because I found their discussions and found them talking about inventing all of these diseases. So this is a PowerPoint presentation that I'm going to share right now.
Well, before we get into it, though,
Yeah.
I know a lot of people are they're either one side of the spectrum or the other. One side of the spectrum is they believe everything Fauci said, or they're on the other side of the spectrum where they think viruses aren't real.
I don't know what to say about that. I really don't. It's like that is a flat Earth argument, and that alone will piss people off because they truly believe the Earth is flat, even though
Right.
every ounce of evidence that they presents the opposite. And they don't, but they don't. They're not a researcher, and they don't actually look to verify the claims. But when you do, it's all lies. Now, viruses, you know. I mean, that's what we're going to be talking about today. And as someone who suffered from COVID, and at the end of this, I'm going to show you the how this actually is the cause. They admit that it's the cause of long COVID, which is what I'm suffering from, all the brain fog and everything. I mean, that's in here too. So we're not just talking about one disease. We're talking about just about every issue. You got Fauci working on his baby is the bird flu. He just loves his bird flu, right? That kills 60% of the people that it infects. You can't. I mean, I'm sorry, but that's not something you really argue with. I mean, it's not real, right? COVID's not real. You're gonna tell me. If you tell me COVID is not a virus or not real, I'm gonna bitch slap you. I mean, I'm going to say, suffer what I've suffered. I'm sorry. And what so many other people the same said, well, there's a reason we're suffering, and it's because of what I'm about to show you. And it's very important for people to realize. The other thing I'll say is that what really pisses me off about this, and the reason I wanted to include you on this, is the legal perspective is really the problem because these guys aren't liable. Nobody's liable. Nobody's
Right.
taking responsibility for any of this. Nobody gets in trouble. Nobody is paying for medical bills. No company is being held responsible for holding a patent on a virus that is killing people and harming people. That's what really upsets me, because this is the legal view. I'll give you an example. And whether you're pro-abortion, which I can't even imagine, or you actually don't want to kill children, right?
Right.
The problem is we've been tricked into having a legal perspective instead of a moral or spiritual perspective. We actually say, is that baby, unborn or born, because now they're killing babies after they're born, right?
Right.
Born or unborn, they don't ask, is that a life? They ask, is that a person? Is that does it have a status as a legal person? That is a sickness that I can't even begin to define, but it's also why these guys aren't getting in trouble for their actions, because they're acting in persons, right? They're
Right.
acting as corporations. That's not them, it's the corporation. Well, what do you do? And so, really, all of our medical bills, they should be free, because these are all pretty much, I mean, they're sponsored and patented by either government agencies or corporations where government has approved them. Nobody should be paying for medical care, and I mean nobody, because most of the diseases that we have are autoimmune or other forms of diseases that are caused by vaccines, by drugs, by all these things. These diseases did not exist. It was only when we started injecting people with things. We're going to cover that in this too. It's only when we started injecting things into our bodies that closely matches our own that our body developed antibodies against itself. So you have arthritis, you have inflammation, you have all these different things. Lupus, right? These are all autoimmune diseases that are being caused by injecting animal or insect or some other part into you that causes a reaction in your body. And so what I'm going to do is I put together a presentation here. I'm going to share that. Um, is that visible?
Yep.
All right. Sorry. Um, okay, so this is the first document. This is from PubMed. It's an official document in government. It says enabling accelerated vaccine rollout for public health emergencies of international concern. Novel oral polio vaccine type 2, right? The reason I was prompted to do this is because a friend was talking to me about how they stopped bombing people so they could vaccinate them. They want to vaccinate 650 Arab people, right?
In
And
Gaza.
these are the same people, right? The same
Yeah.
people who got busted for vaccinating all of the black people who came from Ethiopia and said, "Well, we're Jews." You said anybody who says they're a Jew can be a Jew and come to Israel. Well, I'm a Jew. So all these black Ethiopians came there, and it was news that they got busted for delivering the Depo shot to these people without telling them. So you have a whole generation of black women who have been sterilized and can't reproduce. But that's okay because they're Jews now, right? I mean, they're now Israelis. They don't realize they're not. They've all just become national. That's a goyim, right? The
Right.
Jews don't realize what a Jew is. A Jew is not part of a nation state, right?
Yeah.
Like us, they're just goyim. They don't know it. So, right, these are the same people that sterilized a whole race of people that came in and tried to take advantage of their fallacy. To address the I mean, this tells it all right here. To address the evolving risk of circulating vaccine-derived poliovirus type 2. Let me read that again. To address the evolving risk of circulating, that means people are spreading a vaccine-derived, meaning a patented original virus called polio that is CVDPV2, a patented, genetically altered virus. That is what's circulating. It's not polio, it's what they created. And so it's now an emergency declared because they've caused polio. So, to address the evolving risk of circulating vaccine derived poliovirus 2, Global Polio Eradication Initiative partners are working closely with countries to deploy an additional innovative tool for outbreak response. Novel oral polio vaccine type 2. Right now, keep in mind, the guy who invented this came out in court, Salk, I believe it was, Salk or Sabin, one or the other, came out in court and admitted that it was causing polio. Way back in the, whatever it was, 1940s, 50s, when they first came out with this, he said it didn't work and it was causing polio. That is official court record, right? Now, come full circle, now we have outbreaks of polio happening. So they've paused the bombing and killing of people to eradicate polio, right? So stupid. The World Health Organization's WHO pre-qualification program issued an emergency use listing (EUL) recommendation for NOPV2 in 2020. All right, emergency. That means it's untested, unvetted, have no idea what it's going to do, or maybe they do know what it's going to do. Their UL procedure was created to assess and list unlicensed vaccines, therapeutics, and diagnostics to enable their use in response to a public health emergency of international concern. Polio vaccine, Manmade, was the first vaccine to receive this EUL, paving the way for other emergency vaccines. All right, so they allowed an untested, unvetted, experimental vaccine to be used, and now we have polio outbreaks. This is not just polio, though. This is just about every disease, AIDS, COVID. This is the same exact freaking thing, repeated over and over and over. Okay. Whilst the wild type poliovirus type 2 has been eradicated. The surge of circulating vaccine-derived poliovirus outbreaks is considered to be a major challenge for the global polio eradication initiative. What that means is corporations can now create vaccines because vaccines have a very special category. The Supreme Court actually ruled that because vaccine companies were liable and so many people were getting hurt and killed from the vaccine that they were suing the companies, and so the companies would not make vaccines because they were harming too many people. Now companies are protected. As long as you can call it a vaccine, you're fine, right? You don't have any liability now, and that's exactly what this is. So everybody's rushing them. There's thousands of vaccines on the block to be tested and approved, either normally or for emergency, because if you can make a vaccine, you have no liability according to the Supreme Court. If you want to read the most screwed up decision ever made in the Supreme Court other than eugenics, read that. Read the Supreme Court case on on freaking how vaccine companies have no liability. It will shock you. But why approve an unapproved, untested, unvetted vaccine? Well, it's an emergency, but now we have a poliovirus outbreak type 2 of the very man-made virus, not the wild type, right? That's just like rabies. It doesn't exist anymore. So in 2020, there were 1,062 cases of paralytic poliomyelitis. There was no paralyzed. There's nobody in a freaking iron lung anymore. I mean, you might even know what that is because people have died by now, right? Detections reported from 30 countries across 4 World Health Organization regions, right? So let me get this straight. Wild type polio, the original polio, the only one in nature, has been eradicated. But now we have cases in 30 countries of the vaccine-derived, meaning a man-made virus, right? Again, this is a repeatable pattern that keeps happening, COVID being the latest. This is insanity, but it is business as usual, and it truly is a business. That's the point. The current Sabin oral poliovirus vaccine strains can lose their attenuating mutations over time, particularly when transmitted from person to person. Okay, wait a minute. You're saying that the vaccine transmits from person to person. The virus in the vaccine, they've just admitted the cause of action here. The strain just I mean, are you getting the insanity here, right? Are you understanding why you're sick or why your friends are sick or why people in foreign countries or why Arabs are sick because of the people who stole their land and hate them? I wonder why. Rarely this results in vaccine associated paralytic poliomyelitis in vaccine recipients and close contacts of generation of vaccine-derived poliovirus with transmissibility and neurovirulence characteristics similar to wild poliovirus. They've simply replaced wild viruses with man-made ones because now they can profit off of both the virus and the cure, or the vaccine, which is not a cure. They can't call it a cure because that would be illegal. The whole thing and all the antivirals, so they patent the virus. Now, in order for a company to do research and say, well, I'm going to make a pill that's going to help people recover from poliomyelitis caused by the vaccine, I have to get permission from the patent holder, which is often either government or a corporation or a university. Right? This is the state we've become, the legal state that we are in. How messed up can things really get? Well, the answer is there's no limit because we're in the legal realm here. We're not, this is, no one's asking, is this moral behavior? Is this ethical? No. To them, ethics is a completely different standard because they're scientists, right? So called. I mean, it's the whole thing is, and this, I want you to understand, this is a mirror image of any outbreak, any illness, anything that's happening to us as a society, as a people, where we're you have a global pandemic or this or that. This is why it's happening. This is the insane so-called government that we've set up. It's bureaucracy. There's no moral judgment whatsoever going on. This is psychopathic, right? Um, In settings of low population immunity, they can persist in the community and result in outbreaks of circulating CVD-PVs, in other words, polio. Strategy of responding with monovalent oral vaccine has been largely successful in stopping transmission. However, okay, how is it successful if 30 countries? However, due to the genetic instability described above, and a waning population immunity. Why? Because the vaccine only lasts a very short time. It's not permanent, right? The only way you're going to get permanent immunity to something is if you actually get the disease. But this is a man-made, altered, almost dead virus that doesn't actually cause all of the epigenetic responses that are needed for this immunity. So you have limited part-time immunity. I'm not going to say that vaccines don't work. I'm going to say they don't work permanently. They work, which is why, you're going to get a response, which is, they say that a successful vaccine, and we're going to cover this too, successful vaccine only means that you get a response from the body, an epigenomic, immune response from the body. One antibody is all you need, and they say, oh, that's a successful vaccine. Doesn't mean that if you're exposed to something like anthrax, you're not going to die. Just because you have anthrax forced into your body, causing your body to have a small immune response that's temporary, right? So that's what this is saying. The vaccine, it works somewhat, or it causes the disease. And by working, that means you're actually getting the disease, but only partially, and you're not expressing all the symptoms. Well, it's that expression of symptoms that actually causes the immunity. If you avoid the cough, the rash, the sore throat, and all the stuff that comes with, say, COVID, well, then you're not getting immunity because your body's not responding correctly. So no, vaccines don't actually work, and if they do, it's a very short-term thing, and they admit that. Okay.
It's a
Due to the
subscription.
genetic, it's exactly, that is a perfect analogy, right? Everything's subscription now. You can't own anything. You can't own your own immune system. However, due to the genetic instability, waning population immunity following the global cessation of routine use, just like you said, you canceled your subscription. Government canceled its subscription to the vaccine, and therefore people are going to now get polio, but not real polio, the one that came in the vaccine that they're shedding to each other. While inactivated poliovirus vaccine used in routine immunization and occasionally an outbreak response. So people have polio and you're giving them polio vaccine? That doesn't even make sense, right? Used in routine, protects against paralytic disease from type 2 poliovirus. Bullshit. It provides limited primary intestinal mucosal immunity necessary to stop outbreaks or prevent their emergence following type 2 7 OPV use. Now, again, these are conflicting statements here. How do you stop outbreaks if there's an outbreak currently happening of the same thing? And the answer is exactly what you just said. People that don't continue with the vaccine, now their immunity wanes, or so-called immunity. They'll tell you right in the label it doesn't give immunity. It gives partial, part-time, temporary immune response. That's it. Nothing else. Okay. These slides won't all take this long. This is just the beginning here. Now, this is where it gets kind of interesting here when you find out who's behind this. Central priority of this international group is to develop oral polio vaccine strains that are more genetically stable than this. The novel strain that we're talking about are modified versions of the original with enhanced genetic stability, which means they went in with gain of function and they altered it to be more genetically stable, which will cause certain things to happen that are unforeseen. This is why it's untested, unvetted, and not approved except in emergency use. Therefore, it's anticipated to have a significantly reduced risk of evolution. Okay, meaning that in nature they expect or hope it won't morph into a like COVID does, right? In 2019, the GPEI established this working group to oversee this delivery and manufacture of the vaccine, et cetera, for the public health emergency, receiving its use for emergency use by who? The WHO, which isn't even a frickin' government. It's the world government, right? So you don't have to. We don't have to read this. However, I'll leave it up for a minute so anybody who wants to pause this and read it can. The important part comes right after this, which is in 2011, a consortium was formed with funding support from, oh, look at there, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to develop improved OPV virus strains. It's like everything Bill Gates touches turns to shit. And I don't think that's an accident. I really don't think this is accidental. Researchers from the National Institute of Biological Standards and Controls, which again is a legal entity, not a moral one. It's not like you're going to the church and asking if it's okay. No, no. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, and the Food and Drug Administration, and the University of California at San Francisco, a very moral place, collaborated to design, produce, and test several novel OPV strains in a variety of preclinical studies. Again, nothing natural here, and yet all these people around the world are suffering from a disease, a virus they admittedly produced, designed, and test. How is this even a possible thing? How can this be? And I've been asking that question for a long time, and most people just, turn their nose up, and as long as it's not affecting me, I don't care. The problem is when you get a vaccine, the only thing they test for in their testing model is it's like a 3 day, 3 days after. Did your kid get autism in 3 days? Nobody got it in a week, right? So, that doesn't count. That could have been anything. No. See, the problem with vaccines is they operate in an autoimmune function, meaning you could suffer from the autoimmune dysfunction at a certain age or 10 or 15 or 20 or 30 or 50 years later. There's no way to track that. And yet you have all these studies that show that after tracking people that have gotten the vaccine, they do get these diseases. So, I mean, and then it's the only way you have to have something invade your body. So, you get the idea here of what has happened. And like I said, this is a repeating pattern of just about every disease I can think of that would be declared an emergency, that would be given this emergency use authorization to create an untested and use an untested vaccine, etc. And like I said, they're protected from immunity. The candidates used different combinations of 5 modifications of SAVIN2 genome. So again, what does that mean? Gain of function. They modified the original, making it more virulent, more this, more that, airborne, etc. Changes in the ribonucleic acid RNA sequence, RNA vaccines, right? All of these different things that you can read here. But I go back. Funding support from Bill and Melinda Gates. I mean, it's almost like a script. Like you'd almost expect it. Soon we're going to find the Rockefellers involved here too. Genetic modifications. You can read this on your own. This is how they. Hopefully, this is coming through big enough to read. But these are all the things on the virus that doesn't exist that they changed, right? And it explains, they're trying to reduce the frequency of recombination events, meaning when it's in nature, they have no idea what it's going to do when it comes and gets in contact with another virus or particle that can alter it in nature. No idea what's going to happen, but we're guessing. We've not tested the theory yet because we're going to test it on frickin' Africans or whatever, right? That we're no, obviously, yeah, it didn't work. Um, so and then you want to improve the stability of what you've created. Well, of course you do. You want your whatever you're subscribing, right, to be you want it to be stable. You want people to keep using it. Progress toward poliomyelitis eradication worldwide. Um, Same thing here. In 1988, poliomyelitis was targeted for eradication. Global efforts have led to the eradication of 2 of the 3 wild poliovirus serotypes, that's blood, with only WPV type 1 remaining endemic and only in Afghanistan and Pakistan. But they just said it's in 30 countries. Whoa, that's the new one. That's why. Um, and yeah, again, you can read this if you want to on your own. Renewed efforts to vaccinate persistently missed children in countries and territories where it's endemic. Novel oral polio vaccine type 2 used for polio outbreak response. A global effort for a global health emergency. Same thing. Sharp rise in circulating vaccine derived poliovirus 2. There is no, it's not an emergency. It's just in Afghanistan. Oh, who cares about Afghanistan, right? We already pulled out of there, left it in shambles. We don't care about them. I mean, it's just, I don't know what to say about this. It just pisses me off. And I don't know if people even have the ability to be angry anymore. I think it's been vaccinated out of them, right? Remember when, I don't remember who it was. Was it someone old said they were going to vaccinate? I think it was Saban himself actually said they were going to try to vaccinate out the religious uh, inclination of people, right? Get rid of the God part of the brain. So, I mean, that's what we're dealing with. um, Identifying and reducing risks of neurological complications associated with vaccination. Okay, well, but it doesn't cause neurological complications, does it? It doesn't cause autism, does it? Serious neurological consequences of immunization are typically extremely rare. This is a lie. although they have a potential to jeopardize vaccine programs, as demonstrated most recently during the COVID-19 pandemic. So, yeah. Such risks are typically dwarfed by neurological complications associated with natural infection, so it's better to infect people with their strain rather than the natural run. Okay. Um, an evaluation of serious neurological disorders following immunization, a comparison of whole cell pertussis and acellular pertussis vaccine. So this is the DPV. Can't remember what those stand for, but this is a common one. But I only pointed this out because this is the same thing. It is a vaccine induced problem. Emergency department visits, life-threatening reactions, hospitalizations, disabilities, deaths, seizures, infantile spasms, encephalitis and encephalopathy, which is mad cow disease, or in other words, early onset Alzheimer's, etc. Autism and sudden infant death syndrome. Oh, but vaccines don't cause that, right? There's another one I
Right.
should have put in here that is very clear that it causes autism because it's in a foreign country, right? This is maddening to me. And here it says speech disorders as well, reported with an initial onset of symptoms within 3 days following the pertussis and pertussis. What about after 3 days? What about it? What
Right.
about that? Right? I
Because
mean,
often
so
autism is diagnosed until later, anyways. So
and this is 1997 and 1999, right? So I mean, they've really controlled the media and the propaganda around this because these things are these have been known for a long time. Um, and these are reported on the VAERS, which is the Vaccine Adverse Events Recording System or something like that. Let's see. Again, you can read all this. I was just pointing out that they admit openly that it's odd. I mean, and the other thing is the word that they use, and I made this point, and it pissed people off. Of course, they use the word retardation. The vaccine will retard you, but what it will not do is give you um, autism, right? Because autism isn't a disease. Autism is a spectrum of disease. Retardation is the cause of these autistic diseases, if you want to call them that. Seizures, spasms, disabilities, and speech disorders, these are all part of the autism spectrum, right? The fact that they're even saying autism is amazing to me. Usually they say retardation, but we're trained not to say retardate. We don't use that word anymore, right? Because it's politically incorrect. But as a term of art, as a legal word, as a medical term, a scientific term, it's still very much used. But oh, the fact that I'm using it makes me a bad guy, right? They're retarding your children. And you're not even able to admit it because you say, oh no, he's on the spectrum. Who isn't on the
right.
spectrum? I mean, I think we're all on the spectrum at this point.
Well,
Because,
that's what they
because
say.
yeah,
Everyone.
because, well, that's what they want you to believe.
Right.
Right, because then it minimizes the fact that they're retarding us. I
Same with
mean,
the
it's just
gender stuff. Yeah. It's
listen. Wholesale pertussis vaccine contains no neurotoxins, including endotoxin, pertussis toxin, and endolate, silase, and cyclase. Um, an association between serious neurological disorders and wholesale pertussis immunization. It's right here, guys. You have to stop believing these are natural events. Autism is not a natural event. I mean, it's so obvious when you read any of these reports. They might not say autism or sudden infant death syndrome or anything else, but that's what they're talking about. All right, so this is a website for professional attorneys who deal in patenting of disease. Okay, patent attorneys and their clients looking to enter the antiviral or vaccine space must consider whether the invention at issue is likely to be eligible for patent protection. If it's not, they're not going to do it. They're not. They could cure cancer if they wanted to, but they have to own the cancer in order to cure it. right? They're not going to cure any kind of natural thing. Not that there is a cure for cancer, but it's evolution. It's your body reacting to something. It's not a disease as much as it is a reactionary evolution. So novel compounds are patent eligible because they do not exist in nature. Right? Let me read that again. Novel compounds, that is, a compound is when you take two natural things and put them together. Novel compounds are patent eligible because they do not exist in nature. This does not combine with this in nature, but we forced it, we fused it. Other forms of these compounds, such as crystal forms, hydrates, and solvates, as well as the methods of treatment, are also eligible, and patents are generally easy obtained. But this is the key right here. They do not exist in nature. So you can't patent it. So they don't ever try to treat anything in nature. And that's really because what's in nature generally isn't pandemic, isn't that harmful. All these things that are harming us are their creations. For example, antivirals, HIV drugs, clinical trials, and they have their patents, right? Claims directed to newly discovered wild type strain of viruses are not patentable in the US is because it's a product of nature. A wild type virus strain not modified by humans is not eligible for a patent. That means that any vaccine that you're getting is not the wild type strain of the virus because they have to be able to control everything about it, all the drugs, everything that they're going to use. And if anybody wants to get into this market, they have to get their permission, right? This is telling you what is so important to understand about this whole thing. Every disease that's affecting you that you can get some kind of treatment for is a patented, invented virus or whatever. I can't stress this enough. A genetically modified viral strain that differs structurally from the wild type virus is patentable. This means that it is in the best interest of a corporation and government to allow and to patent and to create everything, to recreate as if they're gods, everything in nature, including us. You got to ask yourself, at what point do we become patentable slaves? Right now, it's voluntary, but at what point, when you start cloning or genetically modifying people, at what point, and what's that end user agreement going to look like? Right? You agree to use this body part, but we own it, and therefore we can use it how we see fit. Patenting compounds, compositions, methods of viral. The new coronavirus cause of coronavirus COVID-19 is the third major global outbreak of a coronavirus in the past 20 years. The spread of COVID-19 brings into sharp focus the issues surrounding patenting antiviral research and preserving exclusive marketing rights for companies developing products, diagnostic assays, and kits and treatments for viral infections. They're telling you this is a business. This is a marketing opportunity. They don't care that that I am suffering from long COVID. They don't care that people died. I almost died from COVID. All they care about is obtaining the rights to develop products. To them, I mean, literally, and I'm going to show you this in a minute, these viruses are products for sale. Now, anybody who says viruses don't exist, all you have to do is go to one of these corporations that sells them. What are you going to say then that they don't exist? Well, I invite you, because it seems like anybody can go buy these things. As long as you agree to their agreement, then their hands are not, they're not liable anymore. You are now responsible for the safety and efficacy, right? I invite you to go, why don't you go get some? Why don't you drink it? Why don't you cut yourself and infect yourself and see what a virus really, do they exist? It's ridiculous.
Right.
And someone that would say, I'm not going to listen to Clint because he believes in viruses. I mean, look, I don't believe in Darwin's version of natural selection, but someone that doesn't believe in these things, natural selection really does come to mind. I'm sorry. in in an almost eugenics, pro-eugenics way, if you're that stupid, really, and I don't really care if I'm making enemies here, people that have these beliefs, it doesn't matter to me because you can't be taught. But you have a faith. You have a faith-based belief. Whereas this is evidentiary. All these patents, all these things. Oh no, they're allowing patents on things that don't exist. I mean, come on. And I could see why that would be a psyop. I could see why,
Right.
why did the Flat Earth Society do what it did? Simply to be heard, simply to interrupt, simply to inject an argument that they knew wasn't real, but that would get them attention. And that's
Yeah.
what these people do. They go on websites, could be talking about anything but flat Earth, and they inject their flat Earth nonsense or their non-virus nonsense. It's patently ridiculous. They should
Well,
patent
apparently
everything.
both of us don't know what we're talking about because we disagree on those things compared to their.
It's not even a disagreement. It's a non-starter. It's a non sequitur. Don't
Right.
come at me with that. It's patently ridiculous.
Yeah.
And if you understand the way the body works, you understand that we have, when we're born with a set of things that give us immunity from the birth canal, which is why it's so important to have a natural birth, so you do get that natural immunity. If you're cut out of the womb, you don't get that. So I mean, the whole thing is just crazy. But what's crazier is that this is happening while people don't even believe they exist. Right? I mean, that's pretty amazing. Um, the point here is that really all they care about. Viruses develop many Machiavellian strategies to evade host immune responses. Combating viral diseases with vaccines and antiviral drugs is a constant challenge. An example of this is the common cold. They know damn well you can't cure the cold. It's there's no it is that's it, these diseases, chickenpox, small, you're supposed to get these. They go into your system, they alter your epigenetic structure, and suddenly, because you got chickenpox, you won't get certain cancers and you won't get this, right? But if you don't get the symptoms, if you get a vaccine instead and you don't express the pox, you don't express the rash, you don't express these symptoms, you're not getting that full body response. And this is a well known fact, it's very well researched. And therefore, you're not getting immunity to other things, cancers and diseases that you would get because your epigenomic switches have been switched on and off. That is why chickenpox is actually one of the most important things for kids to get. That's why they used to have chickenpox parties. so, um, so yeah, they know they can't. There is no vaccine for the flu because they admit very openly. It's even in my documentary that it changes, it alters, it evolves, it mutates, as they say. And that is a very important part of the natural ecosystem that it does so. It's built into it, right? These are not our enemy as much as they are there to. I mean, it's kind of like I compare it to getting a update from Microsoft, right? What's the difference between an update virus and a bad virus that someone else made? Well, in this case, we could compare Microsoft. It's a very bad comparison, but Microsoft is nature or the creator of the computer or your body, whereas this guy over here who creates this bad virus that's designed to destroy it, right? But Microsoft is actually trying to actually keep your computer, but this guy is out to do bad things. Now we know Microsoft is also out to do bad things. Don't get me wrong, just like any government, right? So viruses must insert their genetic material into a host cell to reproduce. This is one thing that people don't understand about the virus and the nature of it is that it's like an internal. It's almost like an internal vaccine, and the virus then hijacks the host cell's machinery to reproduce and fill the cell with viral particles. When the cell ruptures, the virus spreads to other cells and repeats the process. Now, the question is, how do you capitalize on that? Not how do you stop it? How do you capitalize it? and then spread it so you can provide the antibiotics or whatever. Antibiotics they don't make anymore because it's very hard to patent them. They stopped making new ones because there's no profit in it, and so people are dying from diseases that would be easily treatable with very cheap antibiotics. But there's no incentive for corporations, and again, this is a legal or mammon way of thinking. Um, let's see. Antiviral drugs typically do not destroy their target pathogens, but instead inhibit their development or reproduction. So they're not. It's not a cure. In other words, um, let's see. Novel compounds are patent eligible because they do not exist in nature. It doesn't get any clearer than this. This is, and the reason I'm showing you this is because, yeah, the polio virus, the pertussis virus, all these things that are circulating are vaccine derived. Rabies, vaccine derived, but no one, these guys get all the benefits, but none of the liability, is my point. We should be suing any patent holder of any virus that is in us for medical at least, right? Claims directed on newly discovered wild type strain of virus are not patentable in the US. This is because it's a product of nature. A wild type virus strain not modified by humans is not eligible for patent protection. However, a genetically modified viral strain that differs structurally from the wild type virus is patentable. Again, this is a repeat, but it really brings home the point here that anything that you can find that's patented or that has one of these studies is most likely not a natural strain because there's no money in it. The only money is to alter it and patent it. Claims directed to vaccine composition comprising a live attenuated virus are generally considered patentable. Subject matter, because a live attenuated virus has different structural and functional characteristics, etc., than what occurs in nature. Again, it's a repeat, but it really is important to understand this. Recombinant DNA, recombining DNA into a new structure is also a technology, a product that is patentable. These are no longer considered life or natural. They're now technology, art, or a patentable product. So it goes on. It's just the whole idea is to bypass the natural creation and the design of nature to create your own. And if the only way these people, these psychopathic, right, legal minded people who love money more than anything, the only way they'll be happy is if they recreate everything in their own image. Exactly what the Bible warns about, right? These people literally are the Antichrist. I mean, because that means they're against the law. They're against the law of nature. The claim requires that the carrier have structural and physical characteristics that distinguish it from the closest counterpart in nature. Over and over, you know. Now, here it is. To incentivize innovation and research and development, they do this. Well, doesn't it make more sense? Wouldn't a society that is based on the moral equivalent, which would be to incentivize innovation and research and development because it's going to actually benefit and help people? Right? Who cares what the cost is? Money doesn't real. They can write it off. Who cares if a corporation's going to? Well, they care because they own the corporations. Government is the shareholder. And who's the CEOs? Well, it's the elite that we've talked about so many times, right? We're literally being killed and harmed and diseased by this same group of people that we've exposed. And all they care about is profiting from it, owning everything in nature because they've replaced nature with their product. It's all commerce. I mean, this is evil. Their pandemic, this is the other thing that's so sick. The pandemic influenza preparedness framework rewards country for sharing viruses with human pandemic potential. in order to further research that will aid preparedness and response. What does that mean? It means, oh, great, you found a very dangerous, very harmful, possibly deadly pandemic virus in nature, or maybe not. Maybe it's something we created and it morphed in nature, so it's still patentable. We want you to share that with us so that we can alter it, gain a function, apply all the crap we got to do, and patent it. And then, oh, look, sorry, it got released into nature. I mean, God, I live in a completely insane world. But worst of all, I live in a world that has been destroyed from a lack of knowledge, a willful lack of knowledge. It's horrible being in this position, knowing this, and nobody will listen to me. Without gaining exclusive IP protection and marketing rights for a significant period of time, profit-minded companies, why are profit-minded companies in charge of our health? That doesn't make sense. We'll have little incentive to invest in the research and development necessarily to develop diagnostics, vaccines, and antiviral medications. The only way that they will do anything is if they're going to profit from it. And if they can't profit from it, they're not going to do it. How is that? I mean, most people say, well, how is that legal? Well, that's the point. It's a legal, meaning evil, anti-nature system. And that's really ultimately the point I'm trying to make here, is that we need to get out, we need to stop trusting people who don't have our best interests. This is not in our best interest. Making a profit by making us sick and giving us vaccines that cause all kinds of issues that's not in our interest. There are many steps in a virus's life cycle that can be targeted by potential antiviral drug candidates. Oh, but viruses don't exist, right? And here's a list of all those things. These are all what you would call gain of function, what they did to COVID, or I should say SARS, to create the new man-made version of SARS, which was man-made, they admit. I mean, novel compounds and methods of use are fairly easy to patent. And that's all that matters. So, as I said, now VR84 was, was the original strain of Zika. Remember the Zika virus that happened? Look, I can buy it for $734. I can add it to my cart and buy the original strain of MR766, which is the VR84 strain of Zika. And it comes from blood from experimental forest sentinel rhesus monkey, okay? Which is, by the way, the only theory that I've seen that actually was proven and then shelved of why we have the AIDS epidemic, by using certain kinds of monkeys that you shouldn't. Related products: Zika virus, VR 1838, but this one's discounted at $474. No, who can't buy this? That's the question. Who in the world did they limit this to? Oh, look, who originally deposited this into this place? Why, it was the Rockefeller Foundation. Who found and created the Zika virus? Why, it was the Rockefeller Foundation in 1947. Now we get to the legal disclaimers. Now, the question is, who could attain this? Who could just go and buy Zika, take it to a lab, alter it, make their own virus, and cause little babies to be born with giant craters in their frickin' heads? Who can do that? The product is intended for laboratory research use only, not intended for etc. Product is provided as is, and the viability of the ATCC products is warranted for 30 days from the date of shipment, provided the customer has stored and handled the product according to the information included on the product information sheet. I mean, this is like, that sounds like something you get from IKEA. I mean, wait a minute, this is Zika we're talking about here. Except as expressly set forth herein, no other warranties of any kind are provided. or expressed or implied, including but not limited to any implied warranties of merchantability. Are you going to be able to sell it or products made from it? Fitness for a particular purpose, like harming children. Manufacture according to CGMP standards, typically safety, accuracy, and non infringement. In other words, someone already owns a patent. Any proposed commercial use is prohibited without a license from ATCC. They're holding it probably on behalf of the original patent holder, which is probably the Rockefeller. But you got to realize the circulating version of Zika that's causing what is it called? Can't remember the term, where the head shrinkage is not this, or it is this, but it's been modified. What is happening to infants when they're born uh, is something completely different than the wild type virus. Again, repeating the pattern here. Okay, it's sent this product. It's a product. It's not something natural, right? It's a patented product. So you got to ask. Wait a minute. This product is sent on the condition that the customer is responsible for and assumes all risk and responsibility in connection with the receipt, handling, storage, disposal, and use of this product, including without limitation taking all appropriate safety and handling precautions to minimize health or environmental risk. Okay, but what happens when all of that happens? It happened with COVID. Who's responsible? It says they are. So who altered COVID? Well, we know it was government. We know it was sent to China by Fauci himself, even when there was a moratorium on that kind of research, gain of function research. They exempted it. So who's responsible for all of our issues? Nobody. Nobody's responsible. The only way they're going to be held accountable is if we do something collectively, right? But is that going to happen? Well, no, because we don't even frickin' believe in viruses exist.
Right.
Customer, right? So the person with limited liability agrees that any activity undertaken with the ATCC product and any progeny, what's birthed from it, created in a lab, or modifications, gain of function, will be conducted in compliance with all applicable laws, regulations, and guidelines. Well, we've seen that the law is a legal entity, doesn't give a shit about whether it's dangerous, whether it's going to infect people or harm people. They don't care. So what good is this warranty or this disclosure, or right? I mean, it doesn't mean anything, which is why we have all these non-wild type viruses that are and other things that are harming us. And here you go. In no event, right? Here's your end user agreement. In no event shall ATCC, its parents, subsidiaries, directors, officers, agents, employees, assigned successors, and affiliates be liable for indirect, special, incidental, or consequential damages of any kind in connection with or arising out of the customer's use of the product. I mean, this will actually stand up in court. The courts, the legal protectors, will protect them, even though it is their Zika virus that's been altered by somebody else that's affecting people. That's the world we live in. Okay, so what do we do about this? Well, I mean, I leave that up to you. First, you have to understand what's happening. And that's why we're here today. ATCC is not liable for damages arising from the misidentification or misrepresentatives of such materials. In other words, oh, I'm sorry, we sent you anthrax. Our mistake, but we're not responsible. We're not liable. Right? You opened it, went in your face, you died. I'm sorry. Microcephaly, that's the mutation. Scientists might finally understand why Zika virus was suddenly able to cause microcephaly, the shrinking in the brain malfunction or misorder, deformation, retardation, as seen in this child. which will show a picture. A single genetic mutation made the Zika virus far more dangerous by enhancing its ability to kill nerve cells in developing brains, a new study suggests. Oh gosh, I wonder how that happened. How did a gain of function happen if it wasn't in a lab? This small change, which tweaks just one amino acid in a protein that helps Zika exit cells, may cause microcephaly. It's a mutation, right? Then that mutation is another word for a gain of function or a loss of function. Zika virus was discovered decades ago but wasn't associated with microcephaly. So that strain that they're selling is not what causes microcephaly. In other words, it had to be altered. So someone is responsible for these outbreaks, right? Someone bought the virus or did something that causes it to be altered even in the body or in nature. Women, while pregnant, started giving birth to babies with the condition. We've all seen the pictures. It's horrific. Researchers weren't sure why it suddenly became a complication of Zika infections. People in South America might be more vulnerable to the virus. It might be a genetic thing. Perhaps their immune systems don't know how to fight it. They have a genetic susceptibility, or prior infections with dengue fever made Zika worse. Oh, so if I have a previous dengue infection, I might fall in this category. Well, what does that mean? Do we vaccinate for dengue? Do we infect people with dengue virus, a modified version? Isn't that the same as prior infections? Yes, absolutely, because that's what vaccines do. They infect you with a deadened version of the virus. So when your body gets the Zika virus, it has this chain reaction. Oh, a mutation in the virus led to more brain cell damage in much smaller brains. Here we go. Researchers engineered 7 versions of the Cambodian virus, each with one of the epidemic strain's mutations, and injected the viruses into fetal mouse brains. Viruses with one of these mutations, dubbed S139N, a man-made virus, killed brain cells in fetal mice and destroyed human brain cells grown in lab dishes more aggressively than the Cambodian strain did from 2010. Okay, again, insanity. There's your good old Anthony Fauci. Oh, that's evidence. Forget that we're doing gain of function. I'm innocent. Until legally proven guilty. The mutation changes on amino acid in Zika protein called PRM. That sounds like a prion. The protein helps the virus mature within affected cells and get out of the cells to infect others. Oh, but viruses don't exist, right? So babies aren't actually being born with this disease, right? Because viruses don't exist. So it can't be happening. She and colleagues don't yet know why the tweaking the protein makes the virus kill brain cells more readily. Well, probably be the same thing with prions, which cause encephalopathies, holes in the brain, spongiform encephalopathy, mad cow disease, Khrushchev-Jacobs disease, Alzheimer's, all of the dementias. Yeah, that's what's happening. Let's see. In May in Nature, she and colleagues. Now, she is one of the people involved in COVID too. She and colleagues described a different mutation that allows the virus to infect mosquitoes more effectively. Whoa! Now we just added something else that Bill Gates is into. Mosquitoes as flying syringes, flying vaccines. Holy shit! This is all coming together, isn't it? The question then becomes, well, were they using mosquitoes to alter genetically modified mosquitoes when Zika was happening? Brain cells from different people vary in their susceptibility, etc. Here's a picture of a mutation may explain the sudden rise in birth defects from Zika. One small change in a protein. 2013. A candidate tetravalent dengue vaccine is being assessed in 3 clinical trials involving more than 35,000 children between the ages of 2 and 16 years in Asian, Pacific, and Latin American countries. This is a long-term follow-up. Okay? So, yeah, this vaccine was being given to people before Zika virus, the modified gain of function Zika virus started giving children bad juju, right? So what did it say? It said that prior infections with dengue fever or dengue virus that doesn't exist made Zika worse. Oh, well, gosh, now we're really getting somewhere, and it's carried by what? Mosquitoes. What is going on here? So they did these follow-up trials on all these children that they experimented on with their vaccine. The unexplained higher incidence of hospitalization for dengue in the year 3 among children older than 9 years of age because they received the dengue vaccine needs to be carefully monitored during long-term follow-up. The risk among children 2 to 16 years of age was lower in the vaccine group than the control group. A recombinant, live attenuated, tetravalent dengue vaccine has been assessed in 2 phase 3 randomized efficacy trials involving more than 31,000 children. 31,000 fucking children between the ages of 2 and 14 years in the Asian Pacific region. Okay? CYD14 is a patented man-made virus in a vaccine. Okay? How that's going to help with natural dengue, we don't really, you're going to see. And between the ages of 9 and 16 years, the vaccine was administered in 3 doses at baseline, 6 months, and 12 months. Baseline meaning when you're born, when you have no immune system for it to affect. Vaccine efficacy, etc. During the year 3 in the trial, 40 participants were hospitalized for virologically confirmed dengue. 27 in the vaccine group and only 13 in the control group, which didn't get the vaccine. Go figure. Sounds like the COVID thing. However, driven by the 15 cases that occurred among younger children in the vaccine group, so it's okay because the younger children were somehow, right? Variability in the relative risks between year 3, etc. Randomization should have assured a similar likelihood of hospitalization among vaccinated and unvaccinated participants in each center. How does that make sense? We're giving you a vaccine to avoid hospitalization, and our goal is that the hospitalization should be equal among vaccinated and unvaccinated participants? How do you not throw your hands up to that? Well, we're going to find out something here. In addition, there were no significant differences between cases occurring in the vaccine group and the control group. The vaccine didn't work, or it worked, it gave people the fever. Available clinical data are insufficient for drawing definite conclusions about the observed imbalance in younger children. They have no idea what the hell they're doing, in other words. It's just completely experimental, and they're experimenting on freaking innocent children. So these are the notes from this study. I just wanted to, that every article has to, by law, have conflicts of interest listed. So this is 2015, which means these trials were going on when? During the time when Zika virus was happening, when it was causing the deformities. Dr. Chotpilba, the guy who wrote this, reports receiving lecture fees from Sanofi Pasteur, who supported this particular study, participating in recruiting participants for clinical trials in multiple therapeutic areas for Merck, GlaxoSmithKline, Novartis, Sanofi. Oh yeah, he could be trusted, right? He's going to be completely unbiased or non-biased, right? He's not going to lie on behalf of any of these or withhold information like they always do, and is an employee of these people having an equity interest. He has stock in Sanofi Pasteur, so it's in his best interest that they're successful. So no other potential conflict of interest relative to this article was reported. No other. What other is there? Right? I mean, geez. Efficacy and long-term safety of a dengue vaccine in regions of endemic. Okay, so again, 2015. That means this was going on at the time when Zika was happening. And what do we know? We know that if you had a previous dengue infection, with in other words, a vaccination, that you were more likely to. So pregnant women who get dengue or a vaccine, etc. Is new dengue vaccine efficacy data a relief or a cause for concern? Despite decades of attempts, the world has a single dengue vaccine license in numerous countries, but restrictions and conditions, etc. The DNVs are transmitted in tropical, non-tropical, or subtropical regions by what? Infected Aedes mosquito species as they take blood meal from a susceptible host. Right? So here's the mosquito angle again, the Bill Gates supported thing. You can read this all by yourself. The exact immunopathogenic mechanisms of sequential heterotypic dengue fever infections or virus infections are incompletely understood. Okay, so we're doing this to children. We have no idea really what we're doing, in other words. Okay, but it points to all of this, etc. The recent development and deployment of mosquito control methods using genetic or microbial-based alterations to mosquito populations offers the potential for improved outcomes. What? Only live attenuated virus vaccines have achieved licensure, reached advanced clinical. So, in other words, live attenuated virus vaccines. That means they're giving you the virus, and then you spread it. That's what is approved for use. Unfortunately, the optimism that dengue vaccine was finally available quickly became a disappointment when a safety signal was observed in vaccine recipients who were dengue non-immune at the time of vaccine administration. So this is where it gets really lame, really quick, right? You have people who are already got dengue that are so-called immune, right? So they express the antibody, and then you have people that were non-immune because they haven't gotten the virus yet. Okay? I want you to understand that before we go on. In the third year of phase 3 clinical trial, the youngest non-immune vaccine recipients experienced increased rates of hospitalized and severe dengue compared to their unvaccinated peers. Do I need to read that again? More people got sick by being vaccinated than unvaccinated. Okay, but note it, but these were non-immune. They hadn't already had it. This gets funny. Regulators forced the company to modify the vaccine's label, stating that only individuals previously infected by dengue should be vaccinated. How does that make sense? If you've already had dengue fever, you already have immunity. The vaccine would do absolutely no good except that it's been altered. And so whatever they want to do to you, they're doing. But it makes no sense if vaccine science is in any way sound. If you've already had the disease, you should have permanent immunity. Okay? There was an outcry in the Philippines as hundreds of thousands of children had been vaccinated between the time of licensure and acknowledgement of the safety signal. The country subsequently revoked the vaccine's license. The World Health Organization group of experts The experts that have no idea what the hell they're doing modified its original endorsement, recommending it only be used in dengue immune individuals. Why would you vaccinate people who are immune? They actually have said the vaccine works on people who are already freaking immune. And they're getting away with, and these are experts. I mean, how is this? This is insanity. There has been little information on the outcomes, good or bad, of over 800,000 children who were vaccinated with this original vaccine, including hundreds of thousands who received only a single dose when the vaccine program was shut down. Unfrickin' believable. In addition, the rates of dengue and severe dengue cannot be greater in vaccine recipients compared to unvaccinated peers. This is a rule. And yet, they just told you that the opposite is true, right? Lack of benefit. Now, listen to this, guys. Listen to this. Please listen to this, because this should make the hairs on your neck stand up. Lack of benefit against a specific clinical outcome may be acceptable when taken in the larger context of all benefits, but associations between vaccination and developing the disease the vaccine is intended to prevent is not. Associations between vaccination and developing the disease. I mean, my God. How to assess for the potential of vaccine-associated dengue is not straightforward. How do we know if it's natural or not natural? I mean, if you're getting dengue fever or a variation of it after getting it in the wild, well, then you're getting a new disease, right? You're not getting the old because you're already immune to it. This is fucking ridiculous. There is potential for variance. For example, vaccine developers may choose to utilize severity criteria contained within WHO guidelines from 1997, or they could choose the revised 2009 document. So, in other words, there's no law, there's no guidelines. They choose which one better fulfills and protects them from a lawsuit or whatever. Or in order to make the vaccine look as if it's working when it's not. So what they report, they decide which to use. This vaccine is based on okay, here's another one that just blows your mind. This vaccine is based on a yellow fever backbone. So they took yellow fever and they added the 4 types of dengue virus, chimeras, that means they made it, made through the introduction of that PRM, which I probably is a protein, a prion maybe, and E genes, and removal of this and that, and now we have a new, completely, So, are people getting dengue or yellow fever? And if you're getting a combination thereof that looks like dengue fever but is actually yellow fever, I mean, God, if you don't think this is crazy, if you don't think that this is completely illegitimate, then there's something wrong with you. And if you just don't believe it, any of it's true because there's no such thing as a virus, I don't know what to say. Both the Sanofi and Takeda vaccines appear to have a dominant single vaccine virus which replicates after administration. The whole point is to prevent the virus from spreading, and yet they're telling you it replicates after it goes in your body. In other words, it invades your cells and starts creating itself until the cell ruptures, and then it goes into more cells and you get sick. Despite having all 4 of the dengue fever types included in the vaccine, in contrast, formulation of the NIH vaccine, the one that they own, induced replication of 3 or more vaccine viruses in 64% of flavivirus non-immune patients. It is unclear whether homotypic immunity to each dengue type is necessary to be protected against a disease caused by infection. They have no idea what they're doing. Despite having balanced geometric mean neutralizing antibody titers greater than 100 for all types, dengue fever, and high rates of seropositivity, meaning your blood is converted, just like in AIDS or HIV, after 3 vaccine doses, the trial failed to meet its primary efficacy endpoint. The immunogenicity and efficacy mismatch by dengue fever type would occur again during subsequent phases. Recent disclosure of lower of efficacy has further made this a non-viable vaccine. And then they have the nerve to say a safe and good dengue vaccine is better than no vaccine. They go on to say a perfect vaccine would do the following, and you can read that yourself. This is what a vaccine should do, or what actually getting the disease would do as an immune response, a permanent immune response. So they're telling you what a perfect vaccine would do, admitting that there's no such thing, and so we'll settle for a safe and good dengue vaccine. It's just so they don't work, in other words. I mean, that's an admission of non-working. Okay. Now, my point here is that I believe Zika was caused by either these vaccines, these mosquitoes, or both. These dengue vaccines, because it's the same mosquito. Researchers turned mosquitoes into flying vaccinators. Insects could theoretically protect various diseases, but the concept is unlikely to take off. Now, this is from 2010. Keep that in mind. A group of Japanese researchers developed a mosquito that spreads vaccine instead of disease. But vaccine is disease. So, I mean, what the fuck? Regulatory and ethical problems will prevent the critters from ever taking wing, at least for the delivery of human vaccines. They've driven up various ways, these scientists, to tinker with insects' DNA to fight disease. Very, very dangerous. I mean, this is essentially, think Jurassic Park. We're right. We're gonna stop reproduction by making them all males. One option is to create strains of mosquitoes that are resistant to infections with parasites or viruses, or that are unable to pass the pathogens on to humans. These would somehow have to replace the natural disease-bearing mosquitoes, which is a tall order. Another strategy closer to becoming reality is to release transgenic mosquitoes that, when they mate with wild-type counterparts, don't produce viable offspring. That would shrink the population over time. There you go. How do we bring back the dinosaurs and ensure they don't reproduce? Oh, but nature finds a way. The new study relies on very different mechanisms. Use mosquitoes to become what the scientists call flying vaccinators. Normally, when mosquitoes bite, they inject a tiny drop of saliva that prevents the host's blood from clotting. Now, what's happening with COVID and other diseases? You either have non-clotting or you have clotting as a problem, right? You have factor VIII and other things that clot your blood, which some people don't have. They have an autoimmune, and so they have to take it, an injection of it. The Japanese group decided to add an antigen A compound that triggers an immune response to the mix of proteins in the insect's saliva. So there again, if that is any at all similar to what you have in your body, it's going to cause antibodies against your own functionality. A promoter that, let's see, Japan identified a region in the genome, a malaria mosquito that's a promoter that turns on genes only in the insect saliva. Well, how do you know that? How do you know? It's only going to affect the insect saliva. We're all made of the same dust. The promoter they attached to this promoter they attached SP15, a candidate vaccine against leishmaniasis, a parasitic disease spread by sandflies that can cause skin sores and organ damage. Sure enough, the mosquitoes produced SP15 in their saliva. When the insects were allowed to feast on mice, the mice developed antibodies against SP15. You know, I can't stress how dangerous this is. Like, what is SP15 similar to in the human body, which will cause a immune response to your own body? In the experiment, mice were bitten some 1,500 times on average. That may seem very high, but studies show that in places where malaria is rampant, people get bitten more than 100 times. The group has also made mosquitoes produce a candidate malaria vaccine. Now, you got to ask, if this is unethical and you can't do it because you can't get consent from people to do it, you'd be vaccinating people without their consent. Why are they doing it? Why experiment with it? Because, well, this is where dual use comes in. This has military applications. The science is really beautiful, says a scientist at the National Institutes of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. A fascinating proof of concept. Why prove a concept that can never happen? Because you have other plans for it, that's why. People exposed to the transgenic mosquitoes would get vastly different doses of the vaccine. This is why it won't fly. There are a huge variation in the number of mosquito bites one person received compared to the next, so there's no way to limit the amount of vaccine. It would be a bit like giving someone a measles jab and the other 500 jabs. No regulatory agency would sign off on that, right? Right? No moral, ethical, regulatory agency would sign off on that, is what it should say. But we don't have that, right? Releasing the mosquitoes would also mean vaccinated people without their informed consent. An ethical no-no. Because no regulatory agent would sign off on that, right? Yoshida concedes that mosquito would be unacceptable as a human vaccine delivery mechanism. That's in Japan, though. However, flying vaccinators or flying syringes, as some have dubbed them, may have potential in fighting animal disease, says Obrakta. Animals don't need to give their consent, and the variable dosage would be less of a concern. Well, this goes back to the abortion argument. Babies can't give their consent to be aborted, but if they're not persons, then they have no informed consent because, who cares if they're living or not? I mean, they're part of nature. No, it doesn't matter because they're not persons. They don't have consent. Well, this is why we mistreat animals. And this is why there's several groups that want to give animals personhood. They want to give AI and robots personhood so that they have rights. This is the worst thing you can do because that makes them property of government. That's what a person is. So no, you're not freeing them. You're not giving them rights. You're enslaving them when you give them personhood. Just like us. Genetically modified mosquitoes and vaccines. What you need to know about dengue fever. Whoa, wait a minute. See, now we're 13 years later. So apparently, it was decided that it is ethical. So back to dengue fever, right? Zika, dengue. Dengue viruses are primarily spread through the bite of an infected Aedes species mosquito. Oh, same mosquito. But can be spread through infected blood from a mother to a child. Okay, so Zika and dengue come from the bite of an infected Aedes species mosquito and can be spread from the mother to the child. Wonder what that would do to a child. These species of mosquito are also responsible for the spread of Zika, chikungunya, and many other viruses. Chikungunya is another one that Fauci is all interested in modifying and has. Okay, wait a minute. So you got a mosquito that spreads both Zika and dengue. You've got a vaccine that only works on people who've had dengue, and people, wow. I mean, start putting these pieces together, man. A dengue vaccine is approved for use in children between ages 9 to 16 with previous laboratory confirmed dengue infection. So they remember that study we just read? They approved the vaccine despite it being completely worthless and actually giving more people dengue than the control group. And here we are later. They approve it for if you already have a previous infection. In other words, if you already have immunity, you can get the vaccine to give you immunity. They must also be living in areas where dengue occurs frequently and continuously. That includes some areas like the U.S. territories, American Samoa, Puerto Rico, and U.S. Virgin Islands. Imagine that, man. Imagine if you were a company, you create a vaccine that you give to people who've already had a disease and show immunity, and then say my vaccine works because he shows immunity. Again,
Uh,
this is absolutely insane. We are almost to the end, so I know it's taking a while, but it's so important, man. How do we prevent it? Methods include the use of genetically modified mosquitoes.
oh,
Uh,
GMO mosquitoes.
the
Wow.
mosquitoes that deliver dengue and Zika to mothers who then pass it to their children, which have been approved. Wait a minute now, genetically modifying mosquitoes. No ethical government department or agency would allow that, right? Oh no, that was 2010. We're now way
Yeah.
we're a whole next generation
Yeah. Where
now.
did PETA go?
Right, PETA. Um, so they've been approved by, well, what agency would possibly ethically, morally allow this? Oh, the Environmental Protection Agency for use in some countries in Texas and Florida. That's who would do it. These mosquitoes have a gene that prevents female mosquitoes from living to adulthood, so they can't continue to reproduce, which reduces the population. Okay, they, like it or not, mosquitoes are part of the environment, right? So to protect the environment, you don't genocide a whole species, right? I mean, that's not protection. That's the opposite. And if you don't think, like I said, you can read court cases where they approve the uh, uh, what's it called when you prevent someone from having children, sterilization of people in a genetic decision. Eugenics, excuse me. Eugenics was perfectly approved by the courts long ago. Marshall did it, right? They loved eugenics. They wanted to sterilize people who they thought were not up to Darwin's standards, right? They, oh, but that was just the Nazis, right? No. So these are the same people that are genociding now mosquitoes because mosquitoes aren't persons; they have no rights. Why a U.S. company plans to release 2.4 billion genetically modified mosquitoes. So now 2022. The insects created by biotech firm Oxitec will be non-biting males engineered only to produce viable male offspring per the company's promise. And it's the EPA again that cleared the release of 2.4 billion genetically modified mosquitoes in California and Florida. Okay. Um, the plan will reduce numbers of invasive species that carry diseases like Zika, yellow fever, and dengue. See, this is all coming together. What I think this is that they're fighting their own creation. They're getting rid of what they invented. Female mosquitoes will die while males will reproduce and spread the self-limiting gene to the next generation, eventually leading to population declines. Again, the very story of Jurassic Park. Um, and by the way, in Jurassic Park, the actual book, Crichton, I believe, was the writer. They actually used prions
Hmm,
was what they used to
really?
do that. So yeah, the mosquitoes will also contain a genetic marker so that scientists can easily identify them from wild populations. Pilot project the EPA approved in 2020, so it was 10 years after Japanese said this is impossible. No one would possibly allow this. Released 144,000 genetically modified mosquitoes in the Florida Keys and mosquito in Brazil. Oh, hey, Brazil was where all those microcephaly cases were. Isn't that interesting? Claiming that after 13 weeks, the technology suppressed 95% of the mosquito. Hey, eugenics works. I don't care what they say. It's ingenious. It's ingenious, says the scientist, the entomologist. Um, Instead of using a human being to apply a pesticide to kill these mosquitoes, we're using male mosquitoes to do the job for us. It's nature against nature. They're pitting
Wow.
nature against itself, just like they're pitting our bodies against our own bodies. Our own immune
Yeah.
system is attacking us in every way possible.
It's like the side effects of birth control, males and female, right?
This is the ultimate birth control. It's life control. Once released into the environment, genetically engineered mosquitoes cannot be recalled. So we don't know what the side effects are going to be. We don't know if they're actually going to die off. We don't know if they're actually going to mate with other mosquitoes and create a horrible monster that may kill all humans. What we do know is that once we release them, we can't take it back. God, I mean, how do you how is this happening? Well, because there's no ethics, morals, or values in government. That's why. The comment was, rather than forge ahead with an unregulated open air genetic experiment, we need precautionary action, transparent data, and appropriate risk assessments. Oh, are you saying that the EPA didn't require that? I mean, gee. Oh, well, that's why they allowed it, I guess. A mosquito AG trio mRNA vaccine contributes to immunity against malaria. Vaccination, of course, they say is the most, whatever. It's, again, the mosquito saliva protein contributes to protection in mice. A box of 200 mosquitoes did the vaccinating of this malaria trial. That's not a joke. 2022. People actually volunteered for the trial by putting their arm in a box with hundreds of mosquitoes carrying a genetically modified malaria parasite. Right? Now,
I wish these people getting
parasites,
paid.
dude, who would do this? Well, parasites also, they infect the body in different ways and they control the mind. They change the mind. They change things in your body. So they don't just, you know, do one thing.
Right.
My whole forearm swelled and blistered," said Miss Reed. "My family was laughing, asking like, 'Why are you subjecting yourself to this?' And she didn't just do it once; she did it 5 times.
Oh.
You may be thinking this is a joke, and here is the result. Can you
Oh
see
god.
that? I mean,
Look at her eyes. She's got the crazy eyes going.
what I was thinking is that she should have uh, a I got vaccinated sticker, right?
Yeah.
I'm vaccinated. Look at her eyes.
J&J.
Look at me. Look at her. She's got the nose ring.
Oh yeah, the nose ring.
Mosquitoes with human gene hinder malaria transmission. What? So now we've combined human genes into mosquitoes. What's next? What's next? I mean, people say they're going to start putting animal genes or plant genes into humans, right? This is just cloning. This is what I mean. These are now mosquitoes that are owned by a company. I want you to understand these mosquitoes are now property. And when they release them into the wild, this picture shows that they've done something to their eyes. Gave mosquitoes a human gene called PAI1 to reduce the bug's ability to transmit malaria. The fluorescent color in their eyes is used as a marker to distinguish the different variations. So now, imagine the red-eyed mosquito flying at you. You know it's
Oh,
genetically altered. I'm just nuts. Scientists create genetically modified mosquitoes. Sounds like the plot of a bad science fiction movie, because it is. We're in a movie. But it's actually the reality in labs all around the world. Isn't that comforting? Researchers are producing these transgenic mosquitoes. Now, transgenic, that's what they do to mice, right? So they raise mice without certain genes or without certain protective functions so that they can inject them with disease and they'll catch the disease, right? Mosquitoes in the hopes that the bugs could help combat the scourge of malaria. And in a recent study, demonstrated their unique strategy in this realm has strong potential to accomplish this goal, wiping out a whole species. Wow. This disease mostly affects children and pregnant women living in Africa. And it's called Plasmodium parasites. and this is the last little bit I'm going to do here. Uh, Mosquitoes have become resistant to the insecticides, and the Plasmodium parasite has adapted to shrug off anti-malarial medications. This is why people are getting malaria when they're so-called vaccinated or so-called immune. Existing vaccines for the illness only offer protection for a few months at a time. There's your subscription-based vaccines, right? How do you ensure? Now, it used to be in history that the Encyclopedia, I think Britannica said, it's in my documentary, they said the notion that you would say that you need to be revaccinated is what's going to turn people off, because that's ridiculous. If you get immunity, you should be immune. You don't lose immunity, right? Like in the natural realm, you get the disease and you're immune. You get chickenpox once, you don't get it twice,
Right.
right? Existing so if it offers for a few months at a time, then it's not giving immunity, and that's why they don't tell you that they're giving you immunity. It would be illegal. So it's been with us for thousands of years, but we're going to eradicate it. Humans have been with us for thousands of years too. I wonder what they're going to do to us. As the fight against malaria continues, modern scientists are now manipulating mosquito DNA to produce insects that could be introduced in malaria-prone areas to help control the disease's spread. Remember, they own those mosquitoes, right? They want to own nature. Some of these bugs have a supercharged immune response to the Plasmodium parasite, while others produce anti-malarial molecules in their bodies. It's given the mosquitoes a human gene to curtail their ability to spread malaria. Okay, now I want you to understand this very clearly. If the human gene is spread to a human, because it's a human or human-like protein or whatever, the gene, you're going to have an epigenetic response and an immunologic response. In other words, your body's going to create an antibody to fight what it thinks is foreign, but because your body produces the same thing, it's also going to attack what's in your body. This is how autoimmune disease works. And this is why you have all these, lupus, arthritis, all these different things. And I've got other document that I didn't put in here, I should have, that shows all of the autoimmune disease and autoantibodies, they call them, that vaccines have been known to cause. But they don't tell you that. The Plasmodium parasite needs to coat itself with a protein found in the human body called plasminogen in order to reproduce inside mosquitoes and pass from them to humans. So the parasite can't get to you without that. When plasminogen is converted into its active form, it degrades a molecule called fibrin. Now you're going to understand what the hell is happening to everybody, including myself, with COVID once we discover what fibrin is. So when this plasminogen is converted into its active form, it degrades into a molecule called fibrin. So you have fibrin in your body. The plasminogen degrades the fibrin. Fibrin forms blood clots. What if you get an autoimmunity to fibrin? What if fibrin is in your body more than it should be? Then you're going to get blood clots. Oh, isn't that a symptom of COVID? As well as proteins in the extracellular matrix, a molecule mesh that surrounds and protects our cells and tissues. And it allows the parasite to move around and reproduce in the mosquito's gut, which is full of your blood. And it also enables the parasite to enter our bodies by tunneling through the extracellular matrix of our skin after an infected mosquito bites us. Okay, so what is fibrin? Insoluble protein produced in response to bleeding and is the major component of the blood clot. Fibrin is a tough protein substance that is arranged in long fibrous chains, like prions. It is formed when a fibrinogen, a soluble protein that is produced in the liver and found in blood plasma. Sorry, it's produced from it. So that, what we were just talking about, breaks down the whatever that was, breaks down the and creates it breaks down the fibrin, excuse me, and fibrin is what clots blood. When tissue damage results in bleeding, fibrogen is converted at the wound into fibrin by the action of thrombin, a clotting enzyme. Fibrin molecules then combine to form long fibrin threads that entangle platelets, building up a spongy mass that gradually hardens and contracts to form the blood clot. This hardening process is stabilized by a substance known as fibrin stabilizing factor, or factor 8. Okay, again, people take factor 8 who can't or don't have the clotting agent. Now, what would happen if your body developed some kind of allergic response or autoimmune to fibrin, or if fibrin was being uh, mass produced in your body like it is in COVID? Certain rare hereditary disorders may cause malfunction of this stage, the blood clotting mechanism. A few individuals have a hereditary deficiency of fibrogen, they take factor 8. Upon injury to these persons, fibrin cannot form in sufficient quantity to enable a proper clot to form. Another rare hereditary disease involves a lack of factor 8, resulting in a condition in which bleeding is difficult to stop. So, what happens if you get, like I said, what if you get too much? Well, fibrinogen, this is Science Direct, and fibrin synthesis, structure, and function in health and disease. So I have 4 more slides here. This is a study. Let's see. It's fibrogen. Its biological end product is insoluble fibrin, or ogen, or fibrin, can assume a diverse array of conformations with the ability to interact with numerous plasma proteins and cells and withstand biochemical and biomechanical disruption to facilitate wound healing. Quantitative and qualitative defects in fibrinogen, or fibrin, are associated with bleeding, thrombosis, inflammation, and diseases affected by these processes. Who knows how many of these vaccines, injectable drugs, etc., are affecting this? But I can almost guarantee you that the vaccine for COVID, or some part of the virus itself that they genetically altered in gain of function, mutated, is causing this, and we're going to discover that. Molecules interact with and activate cells, mediate inflammatory responses, provide structural integrity to blood clots during wound healing, and perform a host of other functions that are central to physiology and instrumental in physiologic mechanisms. Just so you understand. Now, let's go to COVID, the silent killer. How fibrin drives COVID-19's hidden damage and long-term brain fog, what I'm suffering from, in a major way. New research reveals that fibrin, that which clots blood, the protein that clots blood, a key component of blood clots, may be the secret culprit behind the devastating neurological and inflammatory aftermath of the virus. The virus that almost killed me, put me in a 5-day hallucinogenic state, lost 15 pounds. I mean, it was horrible, including and my legs hurt. I could have sworn I had blood clots, including long COVID. From dense, stubborn clots to brain fog, the interaction of COVID spike protein with fibrin could be the missing link and a potential target for life-saving therapies. How convenient for them. Coagulopathy, the formation of small blood clots that go on to wreak respiratory and neurological havoc, has long been a clinical hallmark of COVID. Long, I don't know. And now it's oft ignored long COVID. New studies suggest fibrin is a key component of this. It plays a role in this. Fibrin provides structure to a blood clot, drives, as we just read. If you think of a blood clot as nature's way of plugging a leak, fibrin deposition deposition is frequently found where there is damage to the walls of blood vessels and the vessels making up the blood-brain barrier. Why does it
Ah,
spread? Why does it spread to the whole body? Well, if you have a fibrin issue, well, then your blood brain barrier now accepts a lot bigger things. Fibrin serves as a plug and a signal for a greater inflammatory immune response. Um, the researchers hypothesized that COVID directly binds to fibrinogen, promoting blood clot formation and altering clot structure and function. They found that the spike protein, that's the thing that was gain of functioned into it in a lab, of the virus binds, and also, by the way, that was taken from an HIV virus. So this is very similar. HIV, or AIDS as they call the syndrome, is definitely an autoimmune function against the immune system. Binds to the fibrogen and fibrin, the protein, at specific binding sites, suggesting that the virus might contribute to abnormal clotting by interacting with fibrinogen. Oh, so suddenly this all comes together. What is COVID? Is it is it, I mean, what is SARS, I should say? SARS 2 now. What is it? Well, I think we could probably safely say that it's some either man-made, lab-made version of what everything we've talked about, right? Zika, from Zika to dengue to all of these different things we've been talking about, they're all related in this way. They found that the spike protein altered the gain of function man-made spike protein altered the structure of clots, making them denser and more resistant to the body's natural means of removing clots, a process called fibrinolysis. Sorry. Additionally, the spike protein enhanced the inflammatory signals from fibrin, increased oxidative forces, right? Oh, take your antioxidants, reactive oxygen species, or ROS, released from macrophages, the first responder of the immune system. So, if you can attack the first responders, if I can prevent the firefighter from reaching the fire, well, then I can burn you. I can just let that fire burn in your body, right? Well, if you prevent macrophages, you get the idea. In converting fibrogen to fibrin, the spike's binding site or epitope is exposed. Research found that antibodies could disrupt and reduce those pro-inflammatory effects implicated in acute and long COVID. Auto-antibodies. Why would you want an antibody against that mechanism? Among the inflammatory effects reduced by blocking the actions of fibrinogen has the deposition of collagen in the lungs, which creates a barrier to oxygen passage and helps to explain the refractory response to supplemental oxygen we have seen in patients. All these things that are happening in people that are suffering from blood clots and the cytokine and all that stuff that's happening, unable to breathe. Now it makes sense. Fibrin also suppresses natural killer cells. What does HIV do? It prevents the NK cell's brother, which is the T cell, right? You got T cells, you got natural killer cells, and you got one other cell that all do the same thing. Well, if I don't have T cells, then I can't contact the body to tell it I have an infection. The body won't respond, and therefore my immune system is down because there's no communication by these. That's how cells work. Killer cells are kind of in the same situation. They can recognize and kill stressed cells without prior exposure to a particular pathogen. So if I prevent my cells from sending out a signal in the form of a protein or a cell or a molecule, in this case, I believe that is interferon, right? The interferon goes to the bone marrow sends out the T cells. Well, if the bone marrow never receives a signal that I'm distressed as a cell, well, it's not going to protect me. There's no reason for it to send out the NK cells or the T cells. So again, this is obviously a biological weapon against the immune system, making them critical first responders. The suppression of NK cell activity results in enhancing viral persistence and lung inflammation. This fibrin-dependent inflammatory response occurs independently of the active virus, suggesting a potential mechanism for persistent symptoms in long COVID. You get the virus, it causes this disease, this immune response or autoimmune problem, but it's now separate from the actual virus. The virus causes it. The virus can leave your system, and it's still happening. Therapeutically, in the mouse, the use of monoclonal. Okay, remember monoclonal antibodies?
Yeah.
The use of monoclonal antibody targeting the fibrin epitope, in addition to reducing the lungs' inflammatory response, reduced neuroinflammation associated with long COVID brain fog. Why were monoclonal antibodies helping people? There were reductions in fibrin deposition and microglial reactivity, leading to improved neuronal survival and reduced white matter injury. Okay, if you have fog, you have been retarded. I have been retarded. My white matter has been freaking injured. That's what they're saying. Microglia are the primary immune cells of the central nervous system. What does COVID seemingly attack? The central nervous system. But is it COVID or is it the spike protein causing this? And then it's separate from the actual COVID. I mean, they're causing, what I'm saying is they're causing autoimmune response. They're causing the body to create the problem by creating antibodies against your own function ends. Coagulopathy in COVID-19 is a primary driver of thromboinflammation and neuropathology rather than a consequence of systemic inflammation. Primary driver. Fibrin plays a causal immunomodulatory role in promoting hyperinflammation. A lot of diseases cause from inflammation, by the way. So, I mean, this is not just a one size. It's causing a lot of different things. Neuropathological alterations and increased viral load in COVID-19 by modulating NK cells, macrophages, and microglia. Contributes to neuropathology. Targeting fibrin may offer a dual mechanism of action by inhibiting fibrin spike interactions and exerting anti-inflammatory effects. And now they're going to target fibrin, which clots blood, which is going to give you that problem. I mean, for every medicine they create or cure or whatever, targeted therapy, they create 3 more problems. A fibrin targeting antibody, now they're telling you they're going to create an auto antibody. Fucking A. Effectively blocks many pathological effects of fibrin, providing neuroprotection and reducing thromboinflammation. But now you're going to have clotting issues, and it's possible that it has the opposite effect. It's possible that you're going to be now dependent, subscribed, as you said, to them for clotting medication or whatever else this is going to do. This is nuts. For long COVID, the fibrin targeted antibody does not interfere with normal clotting. Really? What does it do? Acting solely on the fibrin's inflammatory responses. But when they say that, they don't know. All of this, the reason they do this is because is this reproducible is the question. And you find that 90% of shit that they put out in these reports are not reproducible, therefore they're not scientific. Acting solely on fibrin's inflammatory responses, making it a candidate to protect against pulmonary and cognitive impairment that will, of course, require clinical trials. You going to volunteer for this? I'm not. I'll keep the brain fog, thank you very freaking much. I don't want you messing around more. Fibrin is not just a bystander in the aftermath of COVID-19. It is a key player driving the chromatic symptoms that continue to baffle patients and clinicians alike. The discovery that the virus's spike protein meddles with fibrin, transforming it into a resilient inflammatory force, opens a new frontier in the fight against the pandemic's long tail. Now, a final word here. Inquisitive and conspiratorial bent, oh, that's me, might link these inflammatory responses in the absence of infection to deaths felt to be due to the COVID vaccines, which employ the spike as antigenic stimulus. They note that most hematologic changes are triggered by the vaccine vector and adenovirus, and that COVID-19 RNA vaccines lead to small amounts of spike protein accumulating locally and within and draining lymph nodes where the immune response is initiated and the protein is eliminated. So they're telling you that the vaccine is what is causing all of this. And that, in my opinion, the virus itself, we were just talking about um, flying syringes, basically, but these guys have also in the background. I didn't bring this into a slide, but they're also they're making things airborne. That's part of gain of function. They're making viruses now that are spreadable vaccinators. In other words, their virus itself becomes the vaccine. My opinion, and I might be wrong in this, but from everything I've looked into, it seems I would guess if all the things that all the conclusions I've made, the one I can't really prove it, but they've been trying to make an AIDS vaccine and an HIV. Why would they put an HIV spike protein onto and gain of function it and fuse it onto a SARS virus that wasn't there in the original SARS that can then attach itself like the virus to the ACE receptor? That sounds to me like an AIDS vaccine. That sounds to me like they were creating a vaccine that is airborne. And the this is just my guess. The unfortunate side effect was all the shit that's happened to people from COVID. Right? That's my best guess on what has actually taken place. Now I can't prove that, but I mean that's the only thing that makes sense to me is that they were experimenting with altering just like they do with everything else. They want to alter our DNA through RNA and try to control. The point here, one, they never know what they're actually doing. The side effects are planned or unplanned, are there's never not going to be side effects. The side effects are generally worse than whatever they're trying to cure.
Right.
And I can attest that COVID, you know, it really does destroy cognitive function. I mean, I am a living,
I've seen it in
breathing.
people.
Well, you've probably seen it in me, even since I've known you.
Yeah.
Because I think the last time I had COVID was just after we met, or maybe right before it. Because that
Yeah.
was the one that almost killed me was bad, and it really screwed me up. But then I got it again. It was less severe, but it just me and Shali both, man, it just destroyed our executive function. It destroyed all these different aspects of will and of your autonomic response to things, your body responding to what you think. I mean, I have to force myself now to do everything. I have to force myself to pick up trash or do the dishes or do anything. I can't work because I have. It doesn't, to me, it doesn't feel like a fog. It just feels like I have been. My soul has been just yanked out of me. My spirit, like that which would respond to my brain, my ideas, my it's horrible. And if I wanted to dumb down or make a population docile, that's how I'd do it,
Right.
honestly.
Yeah,
So
I've
I
seen it
really
not just, because we met what late 2022.
something like that,
So
yeah,
yeah, around that same time, I've seen it happen to other people.
dude.
It's harder and harder to work with people nowadays.
I agree. I agree. It's harder. It seems like everybody. I mean, I hate to say it, but
Yeah,
it seems. I Fortunately, I feel like I retained all the knowledge I had, and I can still talk, and I can still. But
yeah.
when it comes to actually doing anything, I need help. I'm screwed, right? I'm really messed up. So, thank you for sitting through that. I mean, I know it was kind of a one-sided thing, but I felt like I had to do that, and I like I said, I don't know if I'd do it by myself because I don't put out videos hardly anymore because I just can't sit down and do it. But knowing that you were going to help me and you were going to sit and do it, I made me sit down and actually do it. So it's that's what Dr. McCarran said. He said you have to you there's no cure for this. You have to physically, mentally reorganize yourself. You know
Hmm.
you have a problem. You know what that problem is. You have to therefore rearrange your routine in your life in order to accommodate this new fog or whatever you call it. And that's what I'm trying to do. So I do appreciate you being a part of that. Is anything didn't make sense or any dots didn't connect?
Uh,
I meant to pull up more on Bill Gates, but I just didn't have time.
well, I would suggest for that people just watch your wagging the dog documentary.
Right? Yeah, and
Um,
the
but
second one as well is pretty.
my thoughts. I think maybe a lot of people watching this might be thinking, "What is the future of this? Are we going to continue? Is this the new cycle of man-made subscription?"
Same as the old cycle, right? Who's
Yeah,
the new boss? Same as the old boss. Yeah, it's just that now they're doing it on they're doing it on a DNA level. They're these RNA
yeah,
vaccines. They've literally, because vaccines are protected, they're developing things that have nothing to do with vaccination in the traditional theory, and they're not liable for anything. So, in my opinion, the only thing that really up front needs to happen is people first. I mean, can you wake people up anymore? I don't know. And if they do wake up, are we all in this situation where we have no spirit like me? Like I can't act on my aggression. I can't act on my, even to pick up my frickin' dirty laundry. I mean, if that's the case, then we're screwed and we might as well accept what's happening. But if there's any spirit left in people, if there's any desire to have any kind of decent life and protect what God has created, well, then it is our duty to stand up against this, at least to force some kind of, I mean, in a legal sense, to force compensation, to hold those who are responsible, because right now
yeah,
Fauci's just getting away with all this. We
right.
know his guilt. All these companies, all these corporations, all these universities that are patenting these, how do we just let them off the, how can they get all the benefits, all the money, all the profit, but have none of the liability for the disease they caused in the first place by creating this chimera? It doesn't make sense. Even legally, it doesn't make sense if you apply any kind of moral or ethical, justice to the situation. I guess that's the point. That's why it's done
Yeah.
in that realm.
Well,
So, I mean,
yeah. It reminds me of how they force everyone to have car insurance. It's very similar. Where, yeah, so I have another question. I guess for people that are experiencing symptoms of everything you just described, the cognitive dissonance, or not cognitive dissonance. Sorry, that's another video that we made. Cognitive decline. Um, do you think people having children going forward, those children will inherit those things?
I think there are some aspects of that, but I mean, my whole goal, my whole point was to get people to stop vaccinating their children,
Yeah.
and to stop doing it to themselves. Stop taking injectable drugs in every form. It's not just vaccines. Any drug that has any kind of similar, like an animal part, like I said, the way they sterilize people again is to put pig ovary into a shot and inject it, and it has a 90% efficacy, and it's how they sterilized wild horses. They just inject you with something that's similar to your own, and then it attacks your reproductive system. Well, this is attacking your immune system,
Yeah.
and these are a good example is HIV, or interferon, which HIV actually prevents. Um, the T cells from the communication aspect of it in Japan. The U.S. and Japan actually had a mutual study where they were trying to, they had a bunch of rabbits, and they were trying to identify what it was. Why can't we make these rabbits sick? And they called it an interfering something molecule or protein. And they ended up that the United States and Japan, once they finally figured out what interferon was, interferon is something they use to treat uh, AIDS. Um, Once they figured out what interferon was, they named it interferon instead of an interfering agent, but that's what it does. Um, it prevents the disease from taking hold. But if you prevent that interferon, like I said, it communicates with the bone marrow, and produces the HK cells and the T cells, and there's one other one I can't remember, um, helper B cells or whatever. You know, this is caused. All these things are caused by bypassing, as that article mentioned, bypassing the barriers, your skin being an extracellular barrier. And you eat, you don't get things from eating, but you inject that same thing and bypass it right into the blood or the tissue. Yeah, that's how you get these diseases. Your body responds to it. I can eat as much uh, cow or pig ovary as I want to, and it's going to go through me, right? But the second I can eat blood, but the second I inject blood, which is a main, serum and they use that in all these vaccines and medicines, chicken embryos and calf liver and calf this and sheep this. As soon as you inject that, and they say right in the labels, you cannot filter this out. The DNA and the proteins are going to get into your body, and your body is going to see that, and it's going to say, "Oh my God, it's foreign. We got to get it out of here. Oh my God, it looks just like your heart. We're going to attack your heart or your lungs or your every part of your ovaries or your spermatogenesis. We're going to attack that because now we have antibodies against something foreign, but is the same. Like I said, we're all made of the same dust, right? So this is what's happening to
Yeah.
everyone. And so stop injecting yourself, first of all. All these medicines on television, an injectable cure for type TEL squamous cell no, leukemia with this and this and this. That is, you gotta read the label, first of all, and see that it's not, no test has been done for pregnant women, no test has been done for this or cancer or this. That means it's going to give you cancer. If no
Right.
test has been done to see if it gives you cancer, chances are it's got something in it's going to give you cancer, and that's a disclosure, an end user agreement, if you will, that says I accept the risk. So we
Yeah.
got to stop taking these drugs, these especially injectable ones. But I mean, the oral ones, some of them are just as bad. A lot of
Well,
us are allergic to them.
I'm assuming most people that will watch this won't get injected, but what can they do to protect themselves from ongoing viruses?
That's just it. I mean, the reason they're so interested in these things is because I had a friend say, "Oh, are you worried about nuclear war or the neutron bomb or the atom bomb? Or what's they going to use?" I'm like, "Well, okay, let's consider. You have a whole infrastructure you want to preserve. Are you going to bomb it? No, you're going to use a
Right.
biological weapon.
Yeah.
these are all biological weapons. Anything that causes any kind of response in your body, autoimmune, is a biological weapon. It's actually defined as that. And they have given permission for these government people and people with license to create these. And so there is there anything you can do personally? I mean, you could pray, I guess. I don't think prayer does much good because you're talking about something that is natural or that is taking over nature and invading your body in ways that you can't even see. So it's not, I mean, I don't know how to say this without the the treasonous bent. But when you have a government that you know, when it has a biological weapons code that says it can test on you anytime it wants to for medical or research purposes, and it does, there have been so many cases, they release ticks to test Lyme disease, they do all these things to us. When you have this kind of situation where you have completely unethical, immoral, psychopathic people, a family of it, right? That has been ruling you and doing this and causing depopulation wars for as long as we can remember. There is only one solution here, which is to prevent it, to stop it, to say no. You don't have power. You don't have our consent. The problem with consent is, as a person of the United States, a citizen, you've already given consent.
Right.
They are the ones that decide what is informed consent, and they do it for you because they're your what? They represent you.
Well, and let's be very clear, because a lot of people think consent means that they have to sign some piece of no, no, no. What we're
Mm-mm.
talking about here is use of the person that they assigned you. So,
Well, the other thing is it's informed consent. They give you the information.
mm.
For instance, the law says that you can be put in punished, put in jail, fined, taxed, extorted. Those are your rights as a U.S. person. They just informed you. You've agreed to that law by acting in person. So you have the right to be extorted. So stop complaining if you accept it voluntarily. But see, the second you stop volunteering, that's when martial law is declared and they come and they kick your ass. Unless we all simultaneously have a spiritual awakening, which is really my only goal, and I kind of gave up on that. I mean, this is not going to happen. This is
Yeah.
not. We are so stuck in the legal matrix and the money matrix that we can't escape it. I mean, it would be great if people stopped thinking of babies as legal persons or not legal persons for start, and
Right.
actually have a freaking heart. But I think I, dude, there's all kinds of historical documents, speeches about vaccinating against spirituality, against God, against religiosity. There's all kinds of, Aldous Huxley and other spiritualists and all these people. They talk about vaccines to stop people from having a spirit. And I mean, isn't that what I just got done explaining happened to me with COVID
Yeah.
fog? I mean, really, it didn't affect the way I feel. It just affected the ability to act on the way I feel. You know what I'm saying?
Mm.
I mean, that almost sounds like that's a great excuse just to be a freaking, nothing, a slave and accept it all. But it's true. They've figured out how to vaccinate against spirituality. Not just propaganda, not just education, which means training for animals, not just, entertainment, but everything combined. The
Yeah.
food, the additives in the
I was
food.
just gonna say, yeah.
I mean, why do we have a Food and Drug Administration that puts drugs into food and says it's this is nuts, right? I mean, I just
Oh, you should see people's faces when I talk about raw milk.
Oh, I know. Everybody's conditioned, right? It's done miracle for me. I lost I mean I've stayed I started eating again, but I lost 40 pounds in about what? About 5 weeks.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty
So
recently. Yeah.
I mean, it was incredible transformation. I sleep better. I stopped snoring and waking myself up.
Mm,
All the things that I was like, I'm gonna have to go on medication for, they went away just because I lost weight and started
mm,
drinking wholesome protein and fat. I mean, amazing transformation. But
yeah.
it's we can't have raw milk. The reason they pasteurize milk is because, man, if you go to a regular whatever factory milk farm, those cows are in horrible shape. There's
Yeah.
pus coming out of their udders.
Oh
That's why they
god.
have to. That's why they have to put all this shit in. They have to boil it. They have to get rid of all the disease. But if I've been drinking raw milk from Redmond Farms for 3 months now, or almost three. Well, I started drinking it probably 6 months ago,
Yeah.
right? And I've only been drinking raw milk, and I'm not sick. I don't have any of these so-called. Obviously, it's their standards are so high; they're way
Yeah.
above industry
They
standards,
test theirs.
and their cows are well treated. They're A2
Yeah.
cows. They're the ones from England. They don't affect people like regular milk does. If you're lactose intolerant, A2 milk is perfect. I mean, and they take care of them.
Right.
They're being, what's coming out of them is pure, as
Yeah.
opposed to what you would have to pasteurize, which is pure pus. I mean, pus and disease and nastiness. So I don't know what to say to people. Like, again, I think this is a prime example of replacing nature with their creation because that is no
Totally.
longer milk. It is a white substance that resembles milk. You can't you can't even make butter out of it because the fat's been rendered in a way and cooked. You can't I can make butter out of this milk, right? And that's crazy. That's
Yeah.
absolutely insane.
Oh yeah. Well, I would love
So,
to give the doubters a blind test between the two, real milk versus fake milk,
it's
and
so
they're all going to say the
satisfying.
real is going to taste better.
Oh, it's satisfying. It's delicious. It doesn't taste like grass or anything. It
Right.
tastes the same. But I mean, if you see what they put into milk, the vitamin A palmate and that, it's like
Ah.
it comes in a bottle that's toxically labeled, and I think that's actually what makes it taste like milk.
Mm,
Honestly, I think that
yeah.
it's an artificial flavor.
Right.
And you find that a lot. You find them having to flavor things that they make, fake meat and all that shit. It's even salmon, right? They have the farm raised salmon, and they're not pink, so they have to add food coloring, and they don't taste right, so they have to add flavor.
Right.
Something's very wrong here, people, and that translates to everything, including what we're talking about. I mean,
It does.
it's absolutely nuts what we're allowing to happen to the earth, to ourselves, to animals, to babies, to I mean everything is being manipulated, genetically altered, and we're just sitting back and just letting it happen. I for one, man, I mean, I just can't I'm dying. Spiritually I'm just dying inside.
I think a lot of people are, and it's easier to say viruses don't exist. Easier to say everyone just homestead and all like, but we have to be realistic here. I mean,
Well,
it's
no.
not what we're seeing happening.
It's the truth is never pleasant. It's never, like I said, I've told people this for a long time. Spiritual awakening is not a pleasant thing. You see the truth. You see what's really happening. You acknowledge what's really happening. And like you said, that no one's acknowledging you. Oh, and it's easier to believe that there's no viruses and the Earth is flat and whatever. I mean, it's pretty nuts, really. But I mean, again, it's brilliant. If I were
Right.
to, you guys are. I'll just say this, man. You guys are freaking lucky. I'm not on their side.
Right.
Seriously, probably Brandon too. I mean, I used to have a friend, and we used to joke, man. If we were the bad guys, people would be screwed because we figure all this stuff out. We can come out with all kinds of schemes to harm
Right.
people, but that's not our nature. Uh, but imagine how many people it is their nature. How many psychopaths are we talking about here? And that scares me. And if you can literally vaccinate empathy and religiosity, if you will, out of people, if you can affect that part of the brain, then we lose. I mean, there will be no checks and balances. There will be no moral equivalent. There will be no God's law. There will be no law of nature because nature's not going to freaking exist as we know it anymore. Think about the Matrix, right? all the bugs are now robots. They're doing that.
Yeah.
They're freaking doing that. I mean, it's incredible. So, uh, nuts.
uh, well, on a lighter note, I think we should do another one of these about end user agreements because Clint and I have uh, realized that there is a solution for that. So
Mm.
we do want to talk about the seriousness of it, but we also want to talk about a solution. So
Next time.
yeah, that's a whole other show, guys.
Dude, seriously, if we were smart, we would make a business out of it. A business model that everybody can actually participate in because you don't have to. I mean, it would
Yeah.
be really simple. What we're talking about, which we will do a show on, I think. It would be very simple to turn it into a business model that everybody can afford, that it's not going to break you, and that would actually protect you from these end user agreements and everything that's in them. I mean, that's what we should do.
Yeah,
I think.
definitely. So we'll talk about that more, guys. Well, Clint, thanks for joining. And yeah, thanks for sharing all that information. I know there's just so much. You have the misinformation from the Fauci types, and then you have the misinformation from the
I think
woo woo types.
it's more accurate to call it controlled opposition,
Yeah.
right? I think that most of us fall for controlled opposition, whether it's the Truth Patriot movement or whatever it is, all the gurus you've exposed. I think these are controlled oppositions designed to lead people astray. And it's hard to think that way. It's hard to think about controlled opposition because opposition seems like opposition. But if you always control what is opposed to you, even down to people who do nothing, let's just take an example, who do nothing at all in their lives but say Jew, 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 Jew. The Jews did this, Jew, Jew, Jew. These guys are not, they are controlled opposition.
Yeah.
They are there to ensure that you keep thinking one, you have to demonize something to keep or praise something. That's a form of belief. You have to keep believing there's this evil force called the Jew that does all this stuff, right? Um, but that's part of the opposition, right? Because it's most of it's so patently ridiculous that, but at the same time, it seems to be the truth, right? And
Right.
you, so you got to know that controlled opposition, misinformation comes from a very, very large group of people. Some of it intentional and some of it unintentional. Some people are just parroting what they hear. Others I just know have to be handlers, have to be controlled,
Which
opposition.
we've exposed a lot of those people.
Right. And it makes no sense to me that there's some of these people are sincere because they're not. When you're exposing them, especially like the court cases they say they won that they know they lost, but they're saying they won, and we show you the court case that they lost, and they still say they won. Well,
Right.
that is obviously a liar, but it's also I'm sorry, that's a psyop. That's a
Yeah. Oh, prime
whoever
example of
they're
that
working
is
for.
when I expose Art of Passing the Buck authors.
Mm,
Their website it says we won the case
hmm
against the DOJ and IRS. But
Right.
if you actually read, because under the permanent injunction, they're actually supposed to list the case on their website. However, if you click on the actual case, don't read what they say on the website. Click on the actual case, and they definitely lost. But yeah, so that's just a sign. I've seen this on multiple permanent injunctions against gurus, they're not enforced. So that to me is a sign these guys are definitely controlled op.
I mean, and who they work for is not even relevant. It's
No,
they're working for somebody, whether it's their own self-interest. The point is you're the target,
right.
right? Not who they work for. You're the
Yeah.
target, and they're either predatory or they're agents of a predator, right? So,
Yeah, absolutely. All right, guys. Well, Clint, we're gonna have to do more of these again. I know we did a bunch last year. I've been busy, you've been busy, but we'll get back at it and stay tuned, everybody.
all right, take it easy, guys.
All right.
Hope you enjoyed it. Is that the right word?
All
Take it easy, man.
right. See ya.